Where's that? I love that we like have our shots, you know?
In frame, because...
Excuse me!
Okay, hold on.
Let's slate.
Not yet. Let me put the glove on.
Oh, yeah, life in Guatemala.
Yeah.
Okay.
What up?
Hello, and welcome to the Trebuchet podcast. I'm your host, Autumn Alec. Welcome back to my RV roof. As just a general legal disclaimer, 1, read everything below. 2, read everything below. 3, this is actually a podcast about Bigfoot. So, in every episode, we're just trying to find Bigfoot. And any things that I say, any disclosures that I make, any likenesses that anybody may or may not appear to resemble, it's just coincidence because, as I said, this is a podcast about Bigfoot. And a while ago, I joked about, I actually got slut shamed for this recently. I'm 39, right? And I was married at 21. That's the whole deal. Fast forward, you guys all know I'm a military spouse, or I was, 17 years. And I got married at 21, which means I got married right out of college to a then butter bar, second lieutenant, divorced a lieutenant colonel. Follow me for tips on when your DOD dependent when your DOD service member tries to get a bifurcated divorce and you're almost at 20 years, and then they basically try to deprive you of health care in a matter of 14 days. Yeah, we're going to talk about that at a later date once my situation is cleared up. But I recently got slut shamed for something. And I talked to my family member recently. And it's a family member I really love and respect. And they are prevalent on social media and post content that some people disagree with because of their beliefs. I've never judged them. I'm like, yo, you do your thing. And I've always felt that way. I've got 5 brothers. I've always been very supportive of them and their things. Just, if that's a healthy thing and if it's feeds their family thing, then, I would never shame somebody for what they do for their job. But said family member was like, I talked to him a couple months ago and they've been very supportive of me on my journey. And I was like, hey, I gotta tell you something. I moved to LA and I'm gonna have a rich guy's baby. And he's like, what? Autumn, no, you can't do that. And I said, oh, what do you mean I can't? And he goes, what? Well, why? Are things really that bad? I'm like, well, yeah, things are really that bad. And yeah, I did get an offer for surrogacy. It was $1 million. $1 million. $1 million. That's a real offer. But obviously I'm not gonna, compromise my morals. So then I jokingly said to said family member, I said, no, instead I'm going to open an OnlyFans. And then they were like, oh, you can't do that either. I was like, yeah, but isn't it better than not having a surrogate? Not being a surrogate for a multi-million billionaire and selling literally my body and my eggs and whatever. Because the offer did come with a harem situation, which was unsubscribed immediately. And obviously a indecent proposal where of course the conversation jokingly over Christmas started with, oh, in vitro, right? And then, and I'm like, oh, fucking goddamn it, LA. You guys, you men out here. But it actually evolved into a really fun friendship where, we're very honest with each other and we joke and whatever. I call it affectionately Man on the Hill, which if you ever hear me refer to myself as Goddess on the Hill, it's a joke because of Man on the Hill. So anyways, said family member shamed me originally when I was like, yeah, I'm going to have a surrogate. And then obviously didn't because I needed the money for these $200,000 in legal fees that I am having to pay to fight the DOD, which, as you remember, you can access the Trebuchet files in the links below. And we've decided to put it behind a paywall. And said family member was like, Autumn, what's the deal with your social media? You're posting all these pictures of you in bikinis. And I was like, okay, well, not really. There's 3 pictures of me in a bikini. And yeah, so what? So fucking what? And I posted of my back because I'm literally turning my back to the DOD. It's my way of giving I don't know if you know what this is. It's a flock of these. It's my way of giving a flock of these to the DOD. And the end of that story is they shamed me and they were like, you know, shouldn't be showing your body like this. And I was like, hold the phone. Did one of your friends ask you for my number? Is that what this is about? Because I grew up with 5 brothers and I know when I'm getting slut shamed. And this is part of the reason why I got married early was because like I wasn't allowed to date. My brothers always were really protective of me. They always got to go and do things like go to prom and whatever. And then like I wasn't allowed to go until I was a certain age. And so there was always like different rules because I was the girl, and I get it. There are different rules for men and women in society. But I got slut shamed. And so I was like trying to like requisition their power, my power back, by being like, well, first of all, I've never shamed you for the content of your social media thread. And if it's what you do, it's what you do, right? But I'm not going to let you shame me because women have done literally what they've needed to do to survive for millennia. And I've run this by my lawyer. I said, how can I make money? Because I got to pay child support supposedly to a lieutenant colonel because it's hard in the streets out here for you DOD service members. But you know what? It really actually kind of is because you guys are on a fixed income. And so I can see where the scarcity and insecurity comes from. And we're going to talk about that when we get to talking about on-base housing in just a second. But being in the DOD is a fixed income. And ultimately, I have unlimited earning potential. So click below to get the files, the Trebuchet files, where I blow the whistle. And that's my DOD whistleblowing information. And also, you may or may not see some pictures of me in a swimsuit. I'm not going to do nudes. There's no nudes. If you're looking for poster butt or nip, you're not going to see. But you might see a little nip. Like you'll see an innuendo of a nip. You might see an innuendo of a butt. But like you're not going to see puss. You're not going to see nips. You're not going to see my buttonhole. That's for darn sure. But you can message me on there, and we can chat. And if you're DOD, holler at me. And then if you're not on the platform where it is the Trebuchet files are being released, for whatever reason, you can get that content somewhere else. And if you're just like tuning in to see how my like transformation journey went, you can follow that at goldenotter.us because that is where you can see what my old body looked like and how I never posted pictures of my body. I very rarely ever like took pictures. And in fact, the only pictures that I have on that website are ones that I took with another State Department spouse in like a boudoir shot. And I felt so beautiful and so confident and so sexy. And my service member was very unimpressed and unhappy with the photos. It was like, are you really going to put them on the internet? And I was like, yeah. And then I got slut shamed in court with said photos. Also told that I was perfectly capable of making a living. Also told that I should shut down this podcast. So anybody, pick a lane. The lane that I'm picking is sexuality should not be shamed. Women's bodies should not be shamed. If you want to show your puss, your butts, like your nips, like a hoots, a what's, and whatever, get after it. Do whatever you want. And if you're a modern military spouse and like you're making money on the side and somebody is shaming you, fuck up. Literally, fuck up. I'm a lieutenant colonel's wife. And if I was still a lieutenant colonel's wife, I'd be saying the same thing. I'd be like, come on over to my house. You want to film content here? Go nuts. We got the biggest house on the block. Go post your nudes up there. Like, what? I don't care. Actually, I don't think you could probably film that kind of content on base housing. And they are kind of strict about like the different types of businesses you can have. But again, I digress. This is why people don't choose to live on base because you have to follow the military's rules. But that's a perfect segue because when you're living in on-base housing, you have to follow the military's rules, but they will not follow their own. And that is how my whole journey as a DOD whistleblower began. I was living in on-base housing at the Presidio of Monterey. I'd already kind of dealt with some chicanery when we were at JBAB doing base bullying in Acosta in DC. And my now 9-year-old daughter had gotten really sick and had rashes on her neck and stomach. And I had to like go and get a note from the doctor to say, hey, this child's getting these rashes. And it's clearly from the carpet because it's not happening when she's outside of the home. Like when we go to visit family or friends, like the rashes would clear up and then we'd come back and she'd be crawling on our carpet, would immediately get them. So it was a huge fight between me and my service member and the housing company. And they did eventually replace the carpets, but only because I advocated so fiercely and so strongly for my child, because I was the one at home with her dealing with the rashes. Or once I started working at the U.S. Army Center of Military History, I was the one that had to stay home with her when she would break out and couldn't go to daycare because, of course, my service member was just not going to take that time off. That burden always falls on the spouse. And that's why, like, as my journey starts to unfold, the reason why it is so important to document what happened to me and the punishment that I faced for speaking out and pushing back against the systems that, like, are meant to oppress us is if it can happen to me, and I'm a lieutenant colonel's wife, it can happen to you in any branch of service at any rank. And it's going to continue happening until enough people hear about it and either get sick of me and are like, you know what? She's just crazy. She just wants attention. She just wants to post thirst traps of herself in her underwear. You know what? That's fine with me. That's totally fine with me. If I need to post some thirst traps of me in my bikinis and get my $200,000 of lawyer's fees fighting the DOD paid for, and then on the back end, I can then go to law school and start to advocate for housing reform on military bases, that life plan works for me. I am unconcerned with whether or not I am the villain or the hero of this story. All I care is that service members and their spouses are getting information. They're not being shamed for doing what they have to do to make a living. And I'm providing you with valuable content. Okay. So this episode is about housing. I started carrying a knife when I lived in Africa because lived in Africa. Now I'm out here. You gotta carry a knife. Gotta stay safe. If you're a military service member who's been put through the ringer and fought the DOD, make sure that you have methods of defending yourself. 1, carry a pocket knife if you need to, like at night when you're going places, like because there's coyotes and creeps. 2, pepper spray. 3, a beat stick. Follow me on YouTube or Instagram for more safety tips from a woman who's got a DVRO against her and cannot own a firearm. Nor would I ever, actually, because I think that if you're going to own a firearm, you need to be responsible enough to use it. And I'm not well enough trained in firearm safety to use a weapon. And I would be at more of a detriment if I had one, because I would just knock it out of my hand and use it against me. And at some point, I will tell you the story about how my service member hid his weapons in the rafter of our garage in our on-base home and then claimed that I was going to use them against him. And it's like, bro, those were in a safe with your fingerprint unlock only in a place where I didn't even know where they were. And also, aren't you the airborne ranger, lieutenant colonel, combat qualified? Or combative qualified and multiple combat tour? Is that? Or no, it's me. All 115 pounds of me, right? Okay. I joke, I kid. Here we go. So we're gonna share the story, point out the problem, point out the solution, give a tool. Still talking about toxic housing and why military spouses tend to choose, or military families tend to live on base. So when you live on base, the military just takes your complete BAH, your basic housing allowance. You usually don't pay for utilities like electric, gas, water, septic, sewer, whatever. It's just kind of easy living. You come in, you turn the lights on, you live there, and then you leave, you do a clean out, whatever. And, we are military, so we're used to following the rules. So generally, the rules are very simple and easy to follow until you start catching the military and the housing providers not following their own rules. And then you're going okay, what is this situation? This is a rules for me, but not for thee. And that was the situation that I got into with our housing providers when we'd had toxic mold in this house. I didn't know it was toxic at the time. My son and I were just getting really sick. And this is at the Presidio in our house. I'll give the address. It was 1603 Mervine Street, Monterey, California, 93940. We no longer live there, but if you live in that home now, please contact me. And if you've lived in that home historically, or the one across the street, 1602, please contact me because those houses are toxic and we have the reports to prove it. Which is part of what I'm getting at is in the military, we move so frequently that you want to live on base because it's nice because you move right into a community and you've got, we'd have block parties and all the spouses would get together and all the kids are around the same age and Halloween is so fun and, it's just a good time. But when it's bad, it's bad. And in a lot of these bases, families are getting sick en masse. It's so bad at the Presidio of Monterey, and this is what my girlfriend across the street and I basically uncovered together because she had 5 kids that were all getting so sick. And I was like, girl, you guys have been sick all year. We've been sick all year. This isn't normal because it was post-COVID. And Anyways, they like ended up going into the walls of both of our houses and just black mold everywhere and septic. And it was just a disaster from start to finish. But she and I had both been documenting it, which is the tool that I gave in episode 7. Document, 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 document. Anybody coming into your home, you need to know who they are and why they are there. That's OPSEC. In case you're not familiar with OPSEC, if you're not a Department of State employee or a DOD employee, or if you're even a military spouse, OPSEC is having situational awareness of who is coming in and out of your home. So on most bases, when you live in military housing, it's behind the gates. And so you have to provide a military ID to get onto the base to then like go to the house. So when we lived in on JBR, Joint Base Bowling Anacostia, on the Washington, D.C., on the Potomac right there in Washington, Potomac River in Washington, D.C., like you could see the Washington Monument, everything, all those pictures. You had to show an ID to get on. And so like vendors, they did a better job with vendors because they had to be vetted and they had to be credentialed to get on base to do the repair and construction. So they were actually doing legitimate work. And because the Defense Intelligence Agency is located on JBAP. So of course, like if you're gonna be getting onto a base and the Defense Intelligence Agency is like, of course they're gonna have high security. Now down at Fort Belvoir, on the other hand, which is just a 20-minute drive down the road, on the Virginia side, they have some of that housing off base. And that tends to be the housing that gets overlooked and goes derelict really quick because they don't have to use the same contractors. They don't have to use the same vendors. They could have just Joe Schmo go in there because they don't have to show ID to get into that housing. So it's a misnomer. They will say it's on-base housing, but it's not really on-base housing. It's operated by the military, it's operated by these privatized housing providers, but like any Joe Schmo on the street, like anybody could just drive in and out. So it's not gated, it's not protected. And that leads to a loophole where corruption can start to seep in and you could start getting like these sweetheart deals where, oh, I don't know, somebody who happens to work in the Army housing office who has a cousin who's got a construction company who maybe doesn't always have their licenses and permits up to date, can just come in and do the work real quick, slap, boom, boom, and get the money because nobody's checking them. Nobody's vetting them. Nobody's making sure that they're going through the RCI proper channels. The RCI is the Residential Communities Initiative Act that governs all of this stuff. And like I said, you guys, when it comes to toxic military housing and domestic violence in the military, I am weaponized research. And when I really start to sit down and go through the nitty gritty of this is the policy and this is this, which I'm gonna probably do with Wondery or like another, or maybe Lemonada, like one of the bigger investigative journalistic companies, because there's so much data and there's so many like legalities of it that like it is worth going all the way through. But what you need to know as a military service member is that if you're in on-base housing and it's not behind a gate, ask for the credentials of those vendors coming in. We lived in the Presidio of Monterey, and when we were displaced from our home at 1603 Mervine, they literally sent some dude into the house. Like, granted, my then spouse is a foreign area officer, and I, at the time, held a security clearance with the State Department. Yes, I was in active status because I was on maternity leave and I was teaching at the time, but even still, I was a security holder. And I still abided by all the, government rules. Don't do drugs and don't do this and don't do that and don't talk to the Russians and don't sell information to the Chinese. Pretty simple stuff, right? But here I am, here he is, doing what we're supposed to be doing. And then these housing providers are literally giving skeleton keys. And you can see this. Click around. There's a video of this. Giving skeleton keys to random ass individuals who are just going into our house and have complete access to our entire lives while we're displaced due to the mold. And I'm like, hi, who are you? What are you doing here? How'd you get a key to my house? Did you find my underwear while you were in there? Because that is what happens. We've seen military spouses, and please, if you have these videos, link, share, talk, go on. I saw somebody a while ago on social media who was like, it was actually really funny, and I was like, slow fucking clap for that. They're like, hi, we're a military family, and we don't live in Section 8 housing. Our doors close appropriately. Our community services are like well-equipped and and it was just like all the things that's wrong with military housing, but in like a very, like, we don't live in Section 8 housing, but like, military housing is becoming Section 8 housing. So if you're a civilian and you claim to be like a big supporter of the military, then the number one thing that you should be doing right now is checking with every single service member who you know or who you've ever known who lived on-base housing, be like, what was actually going on in your on-base housing? Was it really that bad? Look at Camp Lejeune. I filed a congressional inquiry with Senator Dan Sullivan, who's my congressman from Alaska. And it's still ongoing because he was a Marine and actually was very influential in the legislation that helped give, not retribution, what is it called? Not restitution to service members and their families who'd been living in Camp Lejeune when the water crisis hit there and like they had toxic water, right? This is Aaron Brockovich level stuff. Go over to Hawaii. You've got in Aiea, the Salt Bowl, same thing happening there, toxic water. Like the military is poisoning the ground where they had these land leases because you just get these commanders like Commander Scruffly Legs who they pass through every 2 years. And I've talked before, and this name I will say, and I'll shout it from the rooftops, Colonel Greg Ford. That man is a hero. And if you have the wherewithal or you care to go look, Google Presidio of Monterey, Colonel Greg Ford town halls. And it was during COVID. He led the charge on digging into this mold and like what was really going on. And he actually cared. Like he dug into it to the point where he said when he retired, I was like, why didn't you keep going in your career? Because I had a private meeting with him after his retirement with another military spouse and our 2 service members. And he said, I got to a point with the institution where its morals and values were no longer in line with mine. And I had to step away and choose my family. And that was the moment that I was like, my service member and I are done, because my service member will never choose me and our family over the military, which is how our domestic violence situation got so bad. The number of times I begged him to be able to move off base. I mean, I was like, please, can we move out of this toxic housing? Please, can we move out of this toxic housing? I was in the hospital 4 times. My son was in the hospital multiple times. We were diagnosed with building-induced illness. We were fighting all the time. I was like, we need to get out of this housing. It is toxic. And we basically were at the point where we were prisoners. And I mean, quite literally, I was a prisoner because he withheld my birth certificate, passport, and social security card, which if you were a service member, do not do that. That's illegal. If you're a civilian, do not do that. That's illegal. When I was the community liaison office coordinator for the State Department stationed at the U.S. Embassy in Lilongwe, Malawi, we did extensive training on the do's and don'ts when you hire locally employed staff. So locally employed staff are local government employees, but they're local to that region. So like in Malawi, they would have been Malawians. In Paraguay, they would have been Paraguayans. In Prague, they would have been Czech Republic. I don't know what the word is for that. I mentioned that because the State Department is currently investigating something to do with LES staff. And I want to make sure that that is getting on their radar again. But LES are locally employed staff. And there's rules about like the types of documents you can take from them. Or if you have like a domestic worker, like when we lived in Malawi, we had multiple people who lived on our property or who worked for us, and they were domestic staff. And like you can never keep their passports, you can never keep their money, you can never keep their IDs like locked in a safe, because that constitutes human trafficking. And in my situation, when I lived overseas and we were stationed with the Department of State, my service member used to change the passcode to our safe all the time. And you'd say, oh, it's OPSEC, oppositional, or OPSEC. Like, here, look up the acronym, but it's observational, basically having situational awareness to make sure that you're changing your security procedures and protocols every so often. You're not always taking the same route home. You're not always interacting with the same people. You're not making, like, you're not predictable so that somebody could reasonably find you just by predicting your patterns. And, oh gosh, that just like triggered a memory. And so he would say like he's practicing OPSEC, like he would use, like he'd gaslight me, saying he had to change the passcode to the safe every so often. So I always had to call him to ask, hey, what's the passcode to the safe? That's where we keep all of our vital documents, everything like that. It wasn't until I then tried to leave the military housing and I was like on US soil, on a military base, that it took me 2 months, 2 civilian court orders, and 2 months, 2 civilian court orders, 2 lawyers, $10,000, and the Army chain of command getting involved to finally get my birth certificate, passport, social security card, and military ID card that my service member had taken out of my wallet, and then the other things he had kept in a safe. So he kept changing the passcodes too. or like had double, like a key and then like a fingerprint and like whatever, OPSEC, right? So all of these things that I've learned as a military spouse are double-edged swords. Like they can be used to keep us safe, or they can be used to help keep us hostage and help keep us in this lifestyle. So I started episode 7 by discussing the exorcism that my ex tried to have done for me. Crazy. Because I said, like, I wanted to be the perfect wife. And there is this idea as a military spouse that you are a reflection of your service member. And when you go and look at my Golden Otter content, that was a reflection of my service member that he tried to like really keep a tight hold on until it started to get outside of his comfort zone, even though he was into like remote viewing and he was into Bigfoot. He was into all the aliens and weird stuff too, and he like did a remote viewing class with this guy named Dave Morehouse. And like somebody on the metaphysical side was like, that's when he went MK Ultra on him. That they like slipped him out and switched in a body snatcher. And I was like, I like this theory. Let's go with this. This one causes me less heartache and makes me feel more at peace. I'm gonna attach onto this. I'm gonna disassociate to it because I know it's not a real thing, that they don't think it is. But then I can like remove the fact that he didn't find me attractive and like hurt me and did all these things because I wasn't the perfect military wife. And I could be like, oh, it wasn't him. He like, it was invasion of the body snatchers. And I know that's not real. It like emotionally made me feel kind of a little bit better. I was like, I'm gonna go with this theory for a little bit because it's gonna like be balm for my soul. So back to military housing. Part of the reason why we live on base is it's a good place to network. It's a good place to interact with your peers. It's a good place to kind of like raise your social profile. And in the old DOD, there was a lot more like FRGs, family readiness groups, and coffees and potlucks and things like that. And like we're still doing that. And every branch is different. And oddly enough, the only times we've ever lived on base outside of Fort Benning, we were in like mixed branches. So like Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, all of it, Coast Guard. Never served with a Space Force person. But connecting my experience to the systemic issue. So the systemic issue is on-base military housing. Most families choose to live there because of finances, and you don't have to pay for the utilities, like I said, and it just takes the burden off. And if you live in a really high-cost area, they can't raise the rates on you without like letting you know. Like if you get promoted, they do, but they don't usually do like the rate increases that they do at the state level. Now, there is a loophole to that. And in the state of California, the Presidio of Monterey, that's how I initially got them. They were doing artificial rate increases that were out of alignment with the state of California bylines. And then when I tried to call them on it, they're like, no, this is a land lease. Like we're allowed to do whatever we want. And then I talked to Oscar Ordonez. I was like, hey, Oscar, I'd like to know a little bit more about like where all this money, taxes that I'm paying is going. So like, can I get that land lease? He's like, no. Mind you, he didn't have it. None of them even freaking had it. I'm the one that got the land lease. I'm the one that did the FOIA, and then I started sharing it en masse, and people just started posting it on the internet. So if you have chicanery happening at your base, this is the tool. 1, go to your installation website. So for me, is the Presidio of Monterey. Scroll down to the bottom of their website, and there will be a link that literally says FOIA requests. Or if they've got a search bar, type in FOIA, FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. And then they'll either have a blanket form or go to ChatGPT, and maybe I'll even like do a ChatGPT FOIA blanket request for you guys so you can just fill this out. And you submit your FOIA request. And all you do is say, I would like the land lease that governs this land. And that thing was a freaking gold mine. Maybe on episode 9, I will have it. I've got like a stack, and I would like I would substitute teaching, and on my off periods, I would just be like, pew, pew. Okay, here's where they're in violation. And I was like sending information to the Army Housing Community Program Director. Her name is Teresa. And she actually used to work for the privatized housing. Oh, that's a whole other can of worms. So I'm going to put you back to the other tool from episode 7, which was document. Record absolutely everything. A JAG officer named Christopher Capozzi at the Presidio of Monterey told me that if somebody is in your home, especially on base, anywhere really, and in the state of California, again, check your local laws, you have the right to record that because that is your domicile. So as long as you are inside your home or it is reasonably attached to the outside of your home, that is your domicile and you are fully within your rights to record. You don't even have to ask. You don't have to ask. Don't ask these assholes. As soon as they walk up to your door, you say, hi, can I please see your credentials? They will show you their credentials. If they are expired, see ya. That's not OPSEC. If there's anything not above board, say no thank you. How do you know they're not Russians? How do you not know they're not Chinese? You gotta, like, from an operational standpoint, you have to vet these people. That's one. Two, from a, just like from like a quality situation, you have to vet these people. And three, make sure that they're like not somebody's cousin doing a kickback scheme where it's like their uncle used to work for the privatized housing company and then has now started to work for the Army and then has like overlooked a lot of stuff happening at the Army at the privatized housing company and now is going to retire from the Army after a 20-year career and then go work for, guess who? The privatized military housing. So these two institutions that are supposed to be holding each other accountable just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And so anyways, this woman, Teresa, who had seen it on the privatized side, she moved over to the Army job because obviously they're the perfect candidate to get the job. And this is part of that 69-page report that I walked into the garrison commander's office at the Presidio Monterey. And I was like, hey, also, we have a big problem with this. The military is hiring these former employees for these privatized housing companies who are then coming over here knowing where all the bodies are buried and overlooking it because they still have friends and colleagues there, or vice versa. They're going from the Army over to the privatized housing. And here's the other kicker. If you work for these privatized housing companies as a civilian, you get a 50% discount, 50% on your rent. This is why they tried to hire military spouses, because then the military spouses, you get half off your rent, but then those military spouses are seeing things that they're like, so these are like my friends and neighbors, and I'm not really like so down with this. So then they stop hiring military spouses and try to hire people on the economy, and then they hire people on the economy, and people on the economy are like, well, this is way above my pay grade, and I don't want to go to jail for this, because that's what ended up happening is these like regional managers are going to jail for fraud, when really it is not some regional manager at a base in San Antonio that's like doing this. It is high up where they're saying like, make sure that all these work orders are cleared, make sure that they're all good, and they're not. So here we go. Military families often don't get a choice in where they live, especially when housing is tied to deployment orders or command availability. So we were living in the Presidio of Monterey and housing was insane. BAH is like, basic housing allowance is like, it's the highest in the nation. For a lieutenant colonel, it's like 5,500 or something like that. And to get something like that on the economy, like, with the same size and yard and, schools and walk distance, all that, like it's harder to find. The other thing we learned is that on-base housing is managed by private contractors. So the big ones are Balfour Beatty, Lincoln Military Housing. Ours was the Parks at Monterey Bay by the Michaels organization, which if I get off and it's not a military member, go after these privatized housing companies because that's who it is. And they're incentivized to cut costs, and they use employees both on the Army housing side or the Navy, whatever it may be, Navy, Air Force, whatever, whoever the housing office is on the DOD side, and then their own civilian employees to cut costs by manipulating work orders, overlooking things, slapping paint on walls over mold, whatever. And obviously, we've discussed, you can Google this, there's a long history of neglect, cover-ups, and failures to repair hazards like mold, sewage leaks, pest infestations, and faulty wiring. Check, 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 check. Check out this channel for my videos that I started recording based on the advice of a private lawyer named Lance Behringer, who I met with at the... who was he with? He was with Carpenter and Zimmerman. And when we had a meeting with Carpenter and Zimmerman, which again, the only reason I even got that meeting is because I have a brother that's a celebrity, and my brother-in-law saw what was going on and knew the situation I was living in personally. I was like, girl, like, talk to this guy, maybe he can help. And I explained the situation to this lawyer named Grant Savoy, who's actually an employment lawyer, who was like, he had military families. He's like, I've actually heard about these issues in military housing. He goes, and you're very well spoken on the matter, which I know I cuss a lot, and cussing is a sign of low intelligence. I get it. It's a decoy. I cuss so that you all don't know how smart I am, so that when I come get you from the side like a sniper. That was to the DOD, not anyone civilian. That's my superpower, is getting underestimated. Grant Savoy was like, let me dig into this. Then he dug into it. And then another lawyer named Lance Behringer dug into it. And they were like, start recording and documenting all of this. And I exposed like this horrific rodent infestation in the on-base housing that we were living in at the Presidio of Monterey, which was 0506 level housing, it was actually colonel level housing. They moved us into a colonel level house to shut me up over the house that we lived in with mold. And I was like, yeah, it's not going to happen. I'm just going to really talk about this more. And, yeah, I will stop there. But check out those videos. I have like so many more. Like I cannot wait until we do like the full drop and go to the Trebuchet files for that. So families report being gaslit, ignored, when they raise health concerns, especially spouses who are brushed off as overreacting. And God forbid you actually overreact and then they call you crazy. And then you have to spend $30,000 on psych tests to prove that you're not crazy. You have PTSD from physical and emotional trauma caused by a service member who forced you to live in toxic on-base housing and was committing domestic violence for several years. But my domestic violence situation was exposed because the lawyers who were helping us with the civilian case at Carpenter and Zuckerman. Zuckerman or Zimmerman? One of the two. CZ Law. They kept saying, Autumn, why don't you move out of here? Why don't you move out of here? And I was like, I can't. And I was talking to this lawyer named Vlad Eidelman, who I don't think he was barred at the time. He actually went to law school, like right here at Pepperdine, which is so funny. I drive by Pepperdine all the time, and I'm like, Vlad, I gotta meet up with you. They're kind of annoyed with me because I got in their ass too. And I was like, hey, what are you guys doing about this? And they're like, what are you doing about it? I'm like, well, I'm fucking recording a podcast. I'm going to blow everybody's ass up with it. And somebody's going to take this case and somebody's going to get super rich because there is money here, which is exactly what I think his name was Zuckerman. Or was it Mr. Carpenter? Can't remember. I met with the head of one of them and he said, this is a toxic housing tort reform case. And he said, we're not talking millions, we're talking billions. And there's money there. So if you're a lawyer and you're looking into this and you want to take a case that you can win, give me a call. Or actually, better yet, give my lawyer a call, Grant Savoy. Grant, I don't know if you're still representing me or not. You never called me back. It's okay. His wife's a big country music singer, so he's busy. And they got a beautiful family. So here is a little soundbite from a fellow military spouse. We're handed the keys to our home and told it's safe. But too many military families find out the hard way that the gate doesn't keep out negligence. Facts, facts, facts. So some hope, strategy, or real world progress that we've made. One, I've mentioned a bunch of lawyers that you can contact. Ryan Reed is really big in this space. I'll link below. We're going to set up a Google form that you can link to down below to like submit your story. I know we're running out of daylight. And solutions in motion. We've talked about some base commanders who stepped up to hold housing contractors accountable. Colonel Greg Ford at the Presidio of Monterey. If you know a commander who has stepped up at your base, give them a shout out. Drop their name in the comments. Let's raise the profile of these soldiers that are behaving correctly. So I will give my DOD member a shout out. He originally filed an informal complaint and then brought it all the way up to the level of a formal complaint. And we went through this whole rigmarole where he went against this Colonel Scrufflegs. And then they ended up being Penn State buddies and like doubling down on me and being like, you know what, as a matter of fact, let's sweep all this under the rug, sweep the domestic violence under the rug, sweep the toxic housing under the rug, and just go with, she's crazy. Let's get the MPs involved and get her the fuck off base and problem solved. No, not problem solved. But they still have my military ID flag. So like if I go anywhere to get gas or anything, they're like, do you know you've got a flag at the Presidio? I'm like, they're like, do you know you got a flag? I was like, yeah, I'm a whistleblower. And then they just kind of look at me at the gate. I'm like, that's right. They like see me drive my RV. I'm like, burp, burp, can I get gas? Yeah. I'm shameless. I don't care. Okay. So if you know a commander who is like solid, like they're on their game, put it in here. Facebook Warriors. I know there are so many groups, there's so many groups dedicated to domestic violence and toxic military housing. If you have those links, if you know where they are, put them here. Because here's the thing. The military, as we've discussed, is a little bit of a cult and it's a closed society. And so we're shouting into a void. We're shouting into an echo chamber where we all know what the problem is. And if we like if we have lived in on-base housing, we know, and if we haven't lived on-base housing, we're kind of aware of it, but we need to get out of the echo chamber and get into the civilian population where we're discussing it. So my brother performed at the inauguration, which regardless of your political views, if you get invited to the inauguration, you go, because it's historic. That's like really all there is to it. You go, you observe, you see who's there, you see the who, what, when, where, what. I saw so many turncoats. I loved it. I was like, oh, you're here. How about that? Huh. Like, and you can see where people's like money and politics are. Because at the end of the day, it all really comes down to how close can you get to power. It's all just a power shuffling. Whatever. Point of the story is I went to advocate for military families, and every single congressperson I talked to Senator, Speaker of the House Johnson. I talked to, I'm not even gonna name drop. Talked to so many of these leaders, and I was like, I spent like an hour and a half talking to John Boyd about the issue, and we need to get out of our echo chamber. So if you have access to this stuff, screenshot it, blank out people's names, and then post these pictures. Start flooding social media with toxic military housing. Like, we're gonna get a hashtag going, toxic military housing. Another one that I want to start hashtagging is MAHA Moms, MAHAMOS, or hashtag MAHA Military Moms. MAHA stands for Make America Healthy Again. That is JFK's Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s campaign, Make America Healthy Again. Whether or not you agree with his politics or not, again, I don't care. We need to make military housing safe, and he's the current Secretary of Health and Human Services. So, hashtag MAHA Military Moms, because the MAHA Moms are of his whole thing where he helped hold, pharmaceutical companies responsible for increasing rates of autism. And again, I'm not going to get into all that, although we do have an alarming rate of autism specifically in the military communities. And it does make me wonder about toxic military housing, because we literally have to like sign things when we live in military housing. And you take your kids to the DOD facilities or the VA hospitals, and they make you sign, like, do you live in on-base housing? And if you do live in on-base housing, you usually have to provide an extra disclosure, and they do like a lead-based paint thing. Okay, we're almost out of light. So the Military Housing Privatization Initiative Tenants Bill of Rights. So this was signed in 2020, giving military families more protection. That was the document that Colonel Scruffy Legs like tried to like across the table at me, and I was like, nah, bro, you're in violation of this one, and this one, and your housing chief did this, right? Get familiar with it, ChatGPT it, run it against your lease, and then if you FOIA your ground lease, upload those. So, like I said, I just discovered ChatGPT in October of 2024. I'm a weaponized researcher without ChatGPT because I'm an educator, I'm a researcher, I'm a professional historian. That's literally what I do. I wrote a 69-page report for Colonel Klein, or Colonel Scruffy Legs, in 2 nights while nursing a baby because my children were sick and my neighbors were sick, and I knew something was going on and I wanted to figure it out. And so I did all of my own research. But if you just take these things and drop them into ChatGPT and you go, here's the Military Housing Privatization Initiative bill, and here is my lease that I've signed with this private housing company. Here is the ground lease that the United States Army or the Air Force or whoever or whatever has signed with this company. And this is the problem that I'm having. Please type me up a document that shows me where all of these, like where they're in violation of all these things. You can then take that, and you're gonna obviously have to fact check it. Do not trust everything you see on ChatGPT. This is the problem. Like, I'm an educator and 17 years classroom experience. I've got a master's in education. And everybody's like, aren't you scared that your kids are all just gonna start ChatGPTing everything? I'm like, no, because humans are we're not stupid. Humans are machines. We have to learn too. We have to program ourselves. And if you don't know how to build the program, you can't ask the program to give you answers. It's like kids who try to cheat on tests and they like don't even know what class they're in or subject you're taking. We're like, bro, you got to like know what class you're in to actually cheat effectively in this class. So if you ask really good questions, you're going to get really good answers from ChatGPT. But you also have to fact check it and like just don't take it at its word. Always make sure you go in and do your due diligence. Always, always, always. But the number of times I have caught opposing counsel lying, just like saying like if a lawyer ever sends you a threat, run it through ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is like, yeah, they're posturing. There's no actual law for this. The number of times I have caught lawyers just flat out and lying. Lying. I caught the housing providers doing the same thing. And again, that was before I had ChatGPT. That was just me being obstinate, defiant, and like convinced that something was making us sick. And it was, because at the Presidio of Monterey, the problem is so bad that Stanford, right? Stanford Medical Health, Stanford Children's Hospital has noticed an increase in respiratory illness amongst military population-only children. Compared to the greater civilian society, the military families are the ones with the greater rates of respiratory illness happening in the Presidio of Monterey Bay. There was a provider, a brave provider from the Stanford Children's Hospital, who actually wrote a letter to Congress on the matter and was like, hey, like, this is what I'm seeing, and I'm seeing it in increasing numbers. And for a while, he was like my like dude, like sending me families. He's like, it was like an underground railroad. He's like, he was like, that chick can help you. Then what happened is I went through my whole saga, and everybody's like, you heard what they did to that girl, right? You heard what they did to the lieutenant colonel's wife. Like, a lot of people I think might think I'm dead. I don't even know. Like, nobody knows what happened to me. They're like, she went crazy. And I'm like, not really. Some stuff did happen. Some crazy stuff did happen, but I didn't go crazy. I exposed military corruption, and now I'm teaching you how to also do the same. So the tools are, go down to your installations webpage, find the FOIA page, or find the FOIA information, pull it up, figure out what you need to submit. If you have questions, drop them in the DMs, and use ChatGPT to type it up. Saves a lot of time, or do it the old-fashioned way. You could also just like start with an ICE complaint. That's what Colonel Scruffily Legs. Well, did you submit an ICE complaint? It's like, did I submit an ICE complaint? Shut up. Shut up. Actually, shut up. Because if you're gonna do something about an ICE complaint, you would have already done it. And ICE complaints are self-licking lollipops. They literally go back to the same garrison commanders who are in charge of solving said problems, who are just going to ignore the problem because they're only in command for 2 years, and then they move on, and it's not their problem anymore. So ICE complaint, come on. How many of you have ever submitted an ICE complaint, which is like a interactive complaint something where you can report military stuff? I've submitted actual whistleblower documents to the Office of Congressional Oversight, and they're like, this is out of our jurisdiction. I'm like, I literally just disclosed fraud to you, and you're like, just one little bit of it doesn't meet our criteria, so we're not even gonna look at it. I'm like, this is literally this is literally costing American taxpayers billions of dollars. I just delivered it on a silver platter, and you're just gonna ignore it? Elon, get the fuck in here. Get Doge in here. Like, you've been messing up and like disrupting all these other industries and all the other government agencies. How about the DOD? Why don't we look into the corruption that is proliferating the military industrial complex? And let's start with privatized housing, because President Trump, you're a businessman, right? You got your start in real estate. Wouldn't it behoove the American people if their fighting force was not getting sick en masse? And wouldn't it cost taxpayers a lot less money in TRICARE, in USAA claims? Which, by the way, if you get hurt in your on-base home, like I mentioned in episode 7, you can file against your homeowner's policy. That goes for domestic violence and or toxic military housing. So please make sure you check your riders. And like I said, if you're an actuary, you should be checking this too, because it's costing the government billions. And that word, billions, came from a personal injury lawyer who heard me out and said, this isn't little money. This isn't millions. This is billions. Okay, review. FOIAs, document everything. OPSEC, ask for their credentials, always. Record them. That is per a JAG officer at the Presidio of Monterey. If they are in your home, check with your local state laws. But for the most part, if it's happening in your home, or I don't know, if you happen to have a baby monitor in your house, which is how we ended up catching them doing so much shit in our house, was our baby monitors. If you have a baby monitor, that's yours. That's your property. That is your domicile. So even if it's on-base housing, like when you are in your home, you are still an American citizen and you are still entitled to protections. So use them, especially if you're in the military. You guys, we literally fight for this freedom. If you're a military spouse and you are at home and that is your domicile, you deserve to feel safe there. And if your housing is making you sick, then you are well within your rights to speak up and to say, I don't want to be sick in my own home. Please do something about it. And if you don't do something about it, I'm going to file a congressional inquiry, which is your next line of defense. Representative Jimmy Panetta, I got a real issue with him. He knows about the toxic military housing happening at the Presidio of Monterey. And I was told by a reporter, Jen Barnhill, who actually interviewed him on the subject, who she herself is a fellow military spouse and knows all about the issue. She came to my on-base housing when all this started. I need to connect with her. She literally said to me that she was in a closed door meeting with him, or like a private meeting. And he said that he knew about the on-base, like the toxic on-base military housing, and he would do something about it if there was something in it for him. Blech. Do you know how gross that is? Senator or Representative Panetta, you're a former military member. Gross, bro. Actually gross. How about now you've got something to do? Like, how about now there's something in it for you? You can save face, because I'm about to blow your profile up, because I've been in your comment section going, hey, what about the toxic military housing at the Presidio of Monterey? You literally have an office at the Presidio of Monterey courthouse that is quite literally in the backyard of these privatized housing that are making military families sick. Oh, and don't even get me started about the fact that once this housing gets so fucking derelict that they can't have active duty military families in it, that they start letting civilians and retirees live in it. And guess what's happening to them? They're getting sick. You know who else is getting sick? The contractors who work for these privatized military housing companies, who, if they start reporting stuff, they could lose their job. Do you know how many whistleblower? I can't even. Okay, let's go back to the tools. Again, all this will be on the Trebuchet files. You can go get the names, the places, the dates. Wondery, this is where your investigative journalism is going to come in, and this is where the voice memos is like, we're talking to the whistleblower, and this is what's happening. And it's like, it's going to be so good. So like, you're welcome to like step one of the journey. Next, lawsuits and investigations. So the DOJ, Department of Justice, did a settlement with Balfour Beatty for fraud. And, you know, the Department of Justice is bringing this to light. The Department of Justice is also a bit corrupt. Like, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Amy Nelson's issue with them, with Amazon, and how they like basically framed their family, and those lawyers are corrupt. Like, at the end of the day, respectfully, lawyers just want to get paid. I get it. But it shouldn't come at the pain and suffering of somebody else. But it always will, because like ultimately, like being a lawyer is a lot of work, and there's a lot of paperwork. You got to really dig. And maybe with the DOJ getting reformed now, we might actually have some sort of like overlap. So Amy Nelson, if you're watching this, I know Ariel Steenstrom connected us. Let's connect on that, because the DOJ is currently investigating these privatized housing providers. And somewhere on the coast of some warm country, there's an offshore account and a yacht just circling, and somebody's drinking pina coladas, not worrying one little bit that there are increasing numbers of military children on respirators and breathing treatments because the housing that they're living in is making them desperately sick. And medical doctors at institutions such as Stanford University, who are willing to write letters about this, are literally saying this is making these families sick. But here's the thing. If they then cure the sickness happening in non-based military housing, then the providers will get a decreased amount of referrals. So should the doctors even be reporting? I don't know, because then it's less money in the insurance claims that are coming through. But then who's paying these insurance claims? All comes back to the taxpayer, which again is why we need to do grassroots, and we need hashtag Maha Military Moms, MAHA Military Moms, hashtag Maha Moms, tag Jared Christman and RFK Jr. Jared Christman was the campaign manager for RFK Jr. Met him at the inauguration. Super great guy. He's really into like making military housing healthy again. Michael Baum, if you'd like to tag in on this, we would love it. Grant Savoy at Savaki Savoy, you can contact him. Vlad Eidelman was with Carpenter and Zimmerman. Anybody else is free to contact Carpenter and Zimmerman. They're based in California. Ryan Reed is an attorney who's been handling this. He is based out of Texas. And then I'll have some more resources down here. And as this like gains notoriety and profiles, like I will be sure to like connect all that. We've talked about military housing advocacy networks are helping families document, report, and escalate complaints. So if you know of a housing advocacy group, drop it in the comments. There is also a health registry. So for the Army, our family was registered on it, and it's a health registry where you can go and actually like document the issues that are happening in military housing, so that down the line when they end up suing these companies, like Senator Sullivan did when he worked as a legislator for suing it was Camp Lejeune. I'll just say it. Whatever. Who cares? It's Camp Lejeune. So if you were a Marine stationed at Camp Lejeune between a certain time and they had water issues, those service members and their families were compensated. So if you're a military service member or you're a dependent and you've been harmed by toxic military housing or domestic violence, go and report it to your health advocacy network for that installation. The initial point of contact for that is going to be the Family Advocacy Program. And even before that, just your local DOD, what is it called? Military Treatment Facility. So go to your local MTF. If you see an off-base provider, just go into the pharmacy, go into like wherever you get your prescriptions, go in like anywhere on base, even go to JAG, like go anywhere and just say like, hi, I want to sign up for the medical registry for people who've been harmed in on-base housing. And they'll be like, what? And be like, apparently there is one. How do I get it? Check Facebook groups, and like this stuff is all listed there. Okay. I didn't know, this is another quote. I didn't know what to do at first, but I learned. And if you're listening to this, I want you to know there are paths forward. There are. Get loud, get squeaky, and what happened to me will not happen to anybody else. Because if it does, just get a hold of me and I will blast your name into the atmosphere, and I will make sure that you do not face the consequences that I faced. Because once this story goes public, at the rate and level that it will, the civilian population should be astonished. And I mentioned that earlier in this episode. If you know somebody in the military, if you know a military family, talk to them. If they're past, present, future, talk to them. Be like, what was your experience in military housing? And then as a civilian, you are actually so much more powerful and so much more able to advocate for us, because we face chain of command issues where, like my abuser, he was going up against men who could ruin his career. So at a certain point, when the choice was his wife, who he knew was right about this on-base military housing and his and protecting his children, this man chose to protect his career and his fellow soldiers over his wife and children. But he is a perpetrator of domestic violence, so that comes as a surprise to literally nobody besides me, because I was so busy trying to be the dutiful military wife that it wasn't until my own children and I were so sick in our on-base housing that I knew I was going to die. And I will end this how I began episode 7. I talked about this women's group that saved my life, and it's called Walking with Purpose, and it's a faith-based, it's non-denominational, but it's Christian, but we did a Bible study every week. And for me, I would have stayed, because I grew up in domestic violence. I didn't know any better. And I had a very deep belief, I had a very deep belief that I was supposed to stay married forever. Like it was my job. And that was part of the gaslighting my service member husband used to tell me, like, it's our job to get each other to heaven. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, well, if it's our job, then, can you stop telling me I'm fat and ugly and like that I'm gross and that I'm loud, I'm too loud, I'm too this and I'm too that. And I'm not well behaved enough with senior leaders. Could you start appreciating me for who I am? Okay, that's personal stuff. But I was in my on-base housing, and I knew I needed to leave. I'd already been divorced. I'd already been separated one other time. I'd already left once. And I prayed to God. I was hiding in my son's tent in his bedroom. He's an infant. It was like one of those sleep tents, a dark one. He'd been sick for months, going on a year at that point. Sick basically since he was born. He was vomiting all night, coughing all night, mucus all night. And, so worried about my son. And I didn't even care about my health at that point. But I had already been in the hospital 4 times in that year. And I knew it was only going to get worse. And I closed my eyes and I prayed to God, and I said, God, I love this family. I love this home. I love this life that I've built. But if I stay, I will die here. But I am not strong enough to leave. And if you're not strong enough to leave, it's okay. You don't have to be. Pray if you're a person of faith, or ask a friend. And that's what I did. I asked God for help. And I'm not even kidding. Within 2 hours, he answered my pleas. Not how I thought he would. God never usually does. He works in mysterious ways. His wonders are to behold. But that's ultimately how I left. And so if anybody ever says to me, oh, you're so brave and you're standing up. No, like I'm not. I was a coward. I was hiding. I took the fall for a powerful guy because I was too scared of the consequence. My medical records do tell the tale where, I went into the DOD medical clinic and I was like, please don't die. Like, I'm so scared. They're gonna, like, my spouse is gonna see this. He's gonna come after me. And I'm talking like exaggerated because like when I actually think about how scared I was back then, it's like, how scared am I on a daily basis now? Like, I'm a little bit worried that the people who like I'm talking about and revealing, because like they are trained military members, like Colonel Scruffily Legs is former SF, Special Forces. And I had former neighbors like who saw me come home from the hospital in a neck collar who didn't bother speaking up to CID. Like they're former special forces. And like, I do worry that like those guys will come and get me. And like, yeah, I carry a knife for coyotes. That's like, but what am I going to do? Like if the special forces guys are going to come get me, then like, they're going to come get me. If the DOD is going to come get me, they're going to come get me. If the Department of State is going to come get me, they're going to come get me. If, these privatized housing providers are going to get me, they're going to come get me. But if you're active duty military or you're former military and you're one of the good guys and like you don't want your wife and children being hurt, because there are good guys out there. Like I just know that there are because like you guys have saved my life. Start speaking up and just do whatever you can to hold the bad actors accountable. And then last but not least, I've already told you, document everything. And like I said, all of my documents are secure with third parties. So if you come for me, that's okay. We have a release all button. And there's so many times that like I gave my, CID has my iPhone. They still have my iPhone unlocked password, which like I should probably change it now that they don't want anything to do with it. They've closed their investigation. But the number of times that I spoke directly to body cam footage. And I was like, hi, this is my name. This is my iPhone login. This is my passcode. They're like, you don't need to give us all that. I'm like, yes, I do. Because if I die, I want, like, this is my testimony. It's all in here. And you need, hi, PTSD. Door just slammed. It's cool. It happens sometimes. I was like, it's all in here and you need to have it. Document everything, take photos, keep email receipts. I love a good email. And if somebody's like, you send harassing emails, be like, run it through ChatGPT. That was my mistake. I didn't know about ChatGPT, but you could use ChatGPT to really process them. Click on the voice memo part and just be like, hi, write an email to Brianna Cornwall, who is literally Satan and the type of human who represents abusers known. And tell her that she's an awful person and in violation of, and whatever, just say whatever you need to say and get it out of your system. The words I've used to describe this woman to my ChatGPT, they're like, whoa, mama, you need therapy. I'm like, yeah, I'm in therapy. Thank you. Point of the story is ChatGPT will be like, how about we do it like this and make it a little bit more professional? Use that, utilize that. Like, don't make the mistakes that I made, which is like processing things in real time and screaming into the void and being like, how dare you? And why don't you care? Document it. Like literally just document it. Like, this is the problem. Please create a log of it. Another tip, if you're a victim of domestic violence, there's all kinds of apps on your phone where you can it's like the weather app. And like, if you're with a savvy abuser like I was, they're going to figure all that out. And they're probably already checking and like they're monitoring your text messages. They're monitoring your emails. They're monitoring everything. The number of times I got in trouble for the emails I sent by my DOD provider, he's like, you can't, or my DOD service member, he's like, you can't be sending emails like that. I'm like, I didn't know I sent an email like that. And it's like, well, they replied all. I was like, did they? And like, I would delete certain parts out of it so that like, I knew that he didn't actually get the one that I sent. That's neither here nor there. That's like how I eventually realized like how deep the monitoring of my own relationship went and how like the military had weaponized my service member and how I knew I needed to get out because I was going to literally die in that home. Especially since like I canceled the exorcism he tried to have me go through. Real story. But where I was going with that is like document everything, use ChatGPT to document. Oh, on domestic violence, if you're not able to keep a journal of like dates and incidents that things happen. So like if you look at this YouTube channel, I have all of my recordings of the like rat infestation in our house at the Presidio of Monterey. That is, that's why I live there. I'm not going to give that address because family still lives there. But I'm going to edit that. Where I was going with that. Document everything. And if you can't keep it in a safe place, like on your own phone or like in a journal because you're dealing with domestic violence, tell a friend in person and ask them to keep a note of it for you. So I just talked to a civilian whose sister is going through something really similar. And she said that she can't write stuff down because she's afraid that her abuser will see it. And I said, then you need to be her eyes and ears. And that ultimately is what ended up happening with me, is I had enough girlfriends be like, hey, this is the 15th conversation that we've had about this. And they started pointing out the patterns. So ask someone you trust to document this stuff. And it is okay if you end up going back to your abuser. It takes a woman an average of 7 times before they leave because, hey, who wants to end up living in an RV because you've lost your home? Or end up in a women's shelter because you were a trad wife, a traditional wife, and were living on a one income model. And if you are not the service member, even though these houses are supposed to be for the families, oftentimes it is the soldier who gets to stay in the house. So know your rights, document everything, logs, dates, times of maintenance requests. You can go and see my video somewhere in here of the mold work orders. We'll link to it. Use your chain of command, report up the ranks and put it in writing, involve the inspector general if you need to. So with that said, the inspector general in our case, like literally just ruled against me in something. And so like, you know what, that's okay. I'm just documenting it. Like you might be at a base where you happen to get a good set of actors who are in the right position at the right time. And if they're not, just wait. You can go back, like just wait these commanders out. So the garrison commander who banned me from the Presidio of Monterey is no longer there. He's in Jordan right now. So I've got no problem going back and FOIAing his emails between him and another commander. I'll just wait him out. I'm not going anywhere. I had nothing but time on my hands, but they have like very specific career trajectories that they need to meet. Everybody in the military is always moving, but just keep it documented because the statute of limitations on this is different in every state. But if minors are involved and if children are harmed, then there's a much longer window. And again, be careful with your chain of command. You don't know whose side they're on, to be totally honest. Like in my case, like I thought that they were on our side and Colonel Scruffly Legs acted like he was going to help. No, homeboy was like literally just out to protect himself, and eventually banned me from base and just, you know, whatever. So proceed with caution with chain of command. One, your soldier, if they are a good guy, could get retaliated against. And we had Marines say that, and Navy families say that at the Presidio of Monterey where we were. And this goes for anything. If you're reporting domestic violence to your chain of command, or if you're reporting toxic military housing to your chain of command, it could get used against you. I would say report to the Family Advocacy Program, but we are going to deep dive into their disgusting failures and how they are supposed to advocate for you as a family member, but oftentimes they end up advocating for the soldier. And then they do these like kangaroo type incident determination committees where they don't find any fault with the soldier, because we're going to go back to this little thing that we talked about at episode 7 and today. Taxes. Your taxes fund these soldiers' training. So the military and the DOD and the government, all of these programs are invested in protecting what? You, the wife, and the children, who they have to pay your medical for, who they have to pay your housing for, who they have to provide schools for, who they have to provide like community services for so that you stay happy while your soldier is off serving in war for months, if not years at a time? No, ma'am. No, sir. You are not their investment. The soldier is their investment. The seaman is their investment. The spaceman. The Air Force, what do they call those guys? The airman, the soldier, the sailor, the Marine, that is their investment. And if it comes down to protecting a military family, they're going to err on the side of actually protecting the DOD and their investment and the privatized military housing provider. And then if it comes down to protecting the soldier or the military or the family member, they're going to protect the soldier because that is where their investment is. So always follow the money. And to end this, like I always do, that is what President Eisenhower warned against: the proliferation of the military-industrial complex. Joe Rogan, please have me on so we can talk about this, so I can help give tips on military families who want to break the toxic dependency cycle of the military-industrial complex. That is what the Trebuchet is all about. We are breaking the dependency cycle of the military-industrial complex and empowering spouses to become educated on their rights as American citizens and then whatever your state's rights are on housing and domestic violence, and then also educating spouses on ways to be empowered and make money. So again, like we said, I think at the beginning of this episode, if you're going to make your money doing an OnlyFans account, go for it. And as a matter of fact, that's where you can get the Trebuchet files, right here and right here on my OnlyFans, where I might be in a picture of a cute bikini, and you might get a FOIA document that you can then release to the press and use for whatever you want. Now, last thing, safe housing, military initiatives we talked about, the health registries, military housing advocacy network, Office of Inspector General. You could take it all the way up. So like once my Office of Inspector General report comes back null, which I'm assuming it will, you can then kick that up. If there's ever a criminal investigation division report filed, you can kick that up. So there's always recourse. And then you could also file a congressional inquiry with your state representative. So ChatGPT it, or just go onto their web, like figure out who your state representative is. And if you're active duty military, do dual congressional inquiries, because you're going to get different answers. So I'm an Alaskan resident. I grew up in Alaska. So I filed with my Congressman Dan Sullivan. I kind of wish I would have done Lisa Murkowski, because I served as an intern for Senator Stephen back in 2004 when he was the president pro tem under President Bush. I did an internship in DC. And Senator Murkowski was a junior congresswoman at that time. It's her first summer serving, 2004. And she had just been appointed by her father, Governor Murkowski, who had been a state senator and then like came home to, he took over the governorship, and then she got appointed to his seat. So talk about nepotism, but whatever, she's been there. She's doing an okay job. She's a rhino, I think is what they call her, because she doesn't always vote along Republican Party lines. And I respect her for that. It's very Alaskan of her just to kind of go by the beat of her own drum. So like, I kind of regret not getting Lisa Murkowski involved earlier on, but I tried Jimmy Panetta and he was just a joke. He's sent me again recently another thing for another congressional inquiry. So I will submit another congressional inquiry to Representative Panetta, but like, we've already been through this, and you and Senator Sullivan basically came back with the same boilerplate, which was, we've looked into it and the military has looked into itself and discovered it did nothing wrong. Gee golly, you mean they're gonna protect their investment? Like, guys, come on. We got to get smarter. Elon, get involved in this. Get Doge in this. Like, get up in the DOD and figure out where all this money is going. You guys know that we're sending billions of dollars overseas to programs like USAID, which, like, nobody's going to like this. Hot take. It is kind of a waste of money. I've lived in these overseas environments, and, like, the corruption is literally just part of the equation. They literally take a percentage right off the top. When my service member was stationed in Iraq, or serving in Iraq, he was deployed to Iraq, they were like literally giving out books. And he said that the top layer of books, they literally didn't even count because they knew that they were all going to get stolen or like proliferated out. And so they didn't even account for them. They literally count into the equation that there's going to be like corruption. Which I get it, but that is like a part of life, but it doesn't have to be if we actually like hold people accountable. Okay, know your rights, download the Military Tenant Bill of Rights. Here it is. And here's our call to action. You're not alone. You're not overreacting, and you're not crazy. And I've got $30,000 worth of psych tests to prove that, on my end at least. And the next family who moves in deserves better. So let's raise the trebuchet and demand better housing for those who serve and the families who stand beside them. Because you're right, that is part of why I got so loud. I was a community liaison office coordinator for the Department of State, and I learned so much about my rights and so much about State Department employees' rights and the lengths that they will go to protect families. And it was just so drastically different than the DOD. And I was appalled that the Department of State would spend so much time and money and energy and resources to keep these State Department families safe overseas in housing that they have like no control over, whereas the DOD has complete control over every single facet of it, down to the contracts, down to the way that they're negotiated, and refuses to abide by their own laws. And this goes back to President Trump. President Trump, you are a businessman. You started in real estate. This is a very, 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 very simple fix. get get the ground leases to every single installation, every single military base. And they used to have this all on the RCI website, which I'm not even kidding you guys. I like rung them up on that and started whistleblowing on that. And they took down these websites. What they don't know is that I'm an Army historian and I specialize in digital content. And I knew how to go pull them up and screenshot them. And I was like, you sons of bitches, you tried to pull this shit down. Like, how dare you? And I caught him because nothing is ever forgotten on the internet. And anyways, like, if you can't find something that used to be on the internet, like, DM me and I'll show you how to do it. Because, like, seriously, nothing's ever really truly erased because there's always a link. There's always, like, just trust me. Because they tried to pull down my website when I was if you Google World War I Centennial Curriculum, U.S. Army World War I Centennial Curriculum, if it pops up, now they've put it back, but at different points, they've been like, oh, this page is under construction, like, we're moving it. And I've actually checked with my DOD contacts to be like, hey, are they trying to silence me and, like, erase me? And they're like, no, they say it's just being moved. I was like, okay, well, if it's not back up, I have all those original files, and if the Army's not going to use them, then I'm going to put them up on a website and start selling them, because that means my contract is null and void, and they're not using my work product anymore, and I'm going to sell it, because the Army only paid me a couple $100,000 to create it. Anyways, probably not even a couple, 50,000, whatever. Point of the story is President Trump, get the ground leases for every single military base that we have. Let's start CONUS, the continental United States. We will get to OCONUS later, because that's a whole other can of worms, and we're dealing with foreign contractors and foreign on-base housing and all that. Get the ground leases, and then look at what the United States has as their ability to cancel these land leases with these privatized military contractors or privatized military housing. So on the at the Presidio of Monterey, I found multiple areas where the Presidio or the Army, and sometimes it's actually the Army Corps of Engineers who, like, are the ones who, like, do these land surveys and all that. They could be the ones to nullify these ground leases. So get legal involved, look up these land leases, and see where the federal government can rescind the policy. Now, a lot of times the government's not going to want to do this, because then they're going to have to take over all these dilapidated houses, and they're going to be back in a situation that they were in 2001 when we were going to war, and they passed all this legislation to modernize all this, decrepit and defunct housing, which I didn't really give that back history, but here it is. Back in 2001, right before we went to war, which I'm sure if somebody's doing a deep dive on this is like Enron level shit. And if you're a conspiracy theorist, then there's probably something here with these government contracts. But basically, the military had so much dilapidated infrastructure that they couldn't keep up with it. Like, they just literally could not repair all of this and, like, fuel a war and keep military families safe and happy. And so they started selling off or, like, leasing it. They do these land leases where the government actually owns the land, but these companies sign, like, 100-year land leases. And then they put these properties on the military bases, and then they rent them out. But then they end up paying off these houses, like, hundreds of times over, because, to go back to episode 7, if you don't live in military housing and you actually buy your house, the point of home ownership is so that you build equity into a property, so that when you have paid it off after 30 years, you're then not paying for a home in your older years when your cost of living has gone up with the cost of living over time, but your standard of living hasn't necessarily, because you have a house that is paid off. So when you're 65, you're living in a home that you started paying off when you were 20, and presumably, if you've done it right, you've paid it off by the time you're 50. This is how home ownership in the United States used to work. We now don't necessarily have as much home ownership because the threshold for home ownership is so high. But in the military, we have VA loans, which you don't have to put a down deposit. You don't have to come up with, like, tens of thousands of dollars. And so you can become first-time homeowners like us. We were first-time homeowners at 21. And then I got really savvy on homeownership and management. I ended up learning how to do a 1031 exchange, and we up-leveled, whatever. Point of the story is spent all that money on lawyers fighting the DOD and my service member. But I digress. These companies, these privatized housing companies, pay off this housing. And so then they are not incentivized to keep up the properties because they're completely paid off. And when these land leases expire, they just give them back over to the government. They're like, now this dilapidated shit is your problem. And all they have to do is just kind of like paper over the cracks, literally long enough not to get caught. And if they do get caught, then they liquidate their companies, sell them off, become these shell companies, and like move over to these others. Like I looked into TMO, the Michaels organization, and their money train and their pipeline for like where money is coming in is so freaking sketch. So look these companies up, look up their investors, look up where all of this, like follow the money. And wait, you ready for the real mind trip? Follow the money into Congress and who is actually getting funded. So Senator Sullivan, I'm gonna start like really tracking, and same as Senator Panetta, because in different districts, I'm not saying this for Senator Sullivan, I'm not saying this for Senator Panetta, but in military heavy districts, a lot of those politicians are former military. So Senator Sullivan, who serves Alaska, which happens to have like major military bases. That's how I grew up in Alaska. My parents were military. We've gone over that. That's why I was stationed there. He represents the state of Alaska and is military. And so does he have invested interest in protecting the military's agenda? I originally went to Senator Sullivan because he was a lawyer, a litigator, and he was responsible for helping military families at Camp Lejeune with the water issue. So I was like, maybe he's like not bought and paid for. But as we all know, the swamp is the swamp, and sometimes these politicians get corrupt. Senator Sullivan, if I'm talking out of turn, by all means, let's sit down and talk about this. I've requested a meeting with you multiple times. I was even in Washington, D.C. for the inauguration and invited you backstage to watch my brother perform. You could have been backstage with the village people, but you passed. We could have been doing the YMCA backstage at the freaking whatever ball, presidential ball, the big one, the last one, and talking about toxic military housing. You, me, Dr. Amen, who was that other guy? Who was that other guy? The old guy. Sorry. John Voight. You, me, John Voight, freaking Kid Rock. Who else did I kiki with? Megan Kelly, thank you for being so kind. You were very sweet and talked to my mom. John Voight, I also appreciated you talking to my mom. Who else talked to my mom? Michaela Peterson, you talked to my mom. Thank you. That was very sweet. I did not get to meet your dad, Jordan. I would like to talk to him about toxic narcissism and the weaponization of the military-industrial complex and the soldiers. Who else did I meet backstage? It was very kind. Glenn Beck, you offered to help for something and then you ghosted. I'm going to give you like maybe you got like lost text. I get it. It happens. Gosh, I'd have to like check all of my texts and videos and all that. And Tony Hinchcliffe, I've posted about this. I still owe you an apology. I thought you were Sam Altman, who's the founder of ChatGPT, and I invited you out to the gay bars with my brothers. I was like, you want to party with the village people? And you were like, what? And I was like, I think you were talking to Kid Rock, and I interrupted. I was like, hey, we've been looking for you. I thought you were Sam Altman because I thought you were there because all the ChatGPT guys, all the techies were there. And I was like, do you want to go party at the gay bars? Like, after the Turning Point ball that we're at, do you want to go do that? You were like, what? And I was like, do you and Ollie want to go do this? He's like, who's Ollie? I was like, your husband? And I was like, wait, am I outing you? But then, like, Sam Altman's a publicly gay man because I'd seen this article about his husband, Ollie. And I was like, what's happening? He's like, I'm not gay. And I was like, are you not Sam Altman? He's like, no. And then I had no idea. Like, I didn't recognize you, but you're Tony Hinchcliffe. And now, like, it's actually kind of a funny joke because apparently people make fun of you for that. But, like, we go back to episode 7. Hey, do what you got to do. Like, it's 2025. Live your life. Anyways, okay. I digress. I'm here because of a very bizarre set of circumstances, and I will truly end it on this. God works in mysterious ways. And I got out of toxic military housing because I got on my knees and I prayed. And I said, Dear Heavenly Father, I am not strong enough to leave. I need you to carry me. And please get me and my family and my children out of this. And I still pray. I pray unceasingly. And I still, despite everything that my service member put me through, and despite everything that these corrupt leaders and corrupt politicians and corrupt service members have put me through, I pray for them. And hopefully at some point I'll go on like the Girls Gone Bible podcast. I met those beautiful souls. Is that another earthquake? I met those beautiful souls, Ariel and Angela, at the inauguration. And I also met another amazing singer named Kayla. I'll have to tag all you gals in here. And I was backstage and I happened to like walk by and I saw Kayla and she was standing there and I didn't know she was about to go on, but she like looked nervous. I was like, are you? And then they were like, oh, you're about to go on. And I walked past her and I got this call and it was like, go ask her if she wants to pray. And I used to be very like kind of ashamed of like praying out loud and showing people that I was like a woman of faith. And now I just like, I'm like, I'm a woman of faith. And I walked back and I said, hey, I was like, do you want to pray together? And she was like, oh my gosh, I literally was praying that somebody would stand here and pray with me. And I'll post the pictures. And I just said a quick prayer, like let her voice be heard and let her message, ring through. And this transcends beyond politics, right? Because like the president is going to be the president for so many years, but we are Americans for the rest of our lives. And what we do in the United States sets a precedent for everywhere that our footprint touches. And so if we're not holding our politicians and our leaders like accountable, then we are not doing like God's work, regardless of what your faith system is. Like this is technically a Christian nation. We're founded under God. So like, irregardless of your religious beliefs or your political beliefs, doing the right thing is doing the right thing. And in this situation, standing up for women and children is the right thing. So if you're a military family, ask for help. If you're a civilian, ask how you can help. If you have a platform where you can elevate this, please do. And with that, this is the Trebuchet. Launch yourself into your next day. I need to come up with a closing. We'll get there. All right, we'll see you next time. Have a good one. Thank you.